Scott, that's Jay, Wellfire.com Final Days Report, episode 285. IDF Stand Down that allowed Israeli citizen carnage. Israeli Defense Force stand down evidence. We're going to cover multiple proof points. This is a false flag, my friends. And why? What's the strategy? Well, we're going to discuss New World Order in the big picture. I find it interesting that the West is being flooded by Muslims. Folks, a civil war is inevitable in the United States and also in European countries with this planned invasion. You need to think about it. Protests are happening everywhere. How does this tie to Bible prophecy as well? Part of this is going to be a Bible lesson. And what I'm looking for next in terms of biblical prophecy end of days markers. For those of you with suppression social media platforms such as YouTube, click the link below to actually hear the full VCast, because this will get a strike, my friends. But first of all, the stand down evidence by the Israeli military is over the top. I want to play this young lady. What I found interesting, she spent time in military intelligence. I have a friend who was super smart in high school, and he told me when he was in the military, he scored a perfect score on the IQ test. They were begging him to join the military intelligence. So this woman is probably sharp in terms of standardized testing. And she goes on to say, no way would this ever happen. You think about the technology that these countries have, that Israel has. They have technology that can see miles underground. They can see tunnels. I'm not buying for 1 second that this was an Israeli spy intelligence failure. No way. Multiple proof points. And people in the military are actually blowing the whistle from Israel. And I find it interesting. She talks about how the government is corrupt in Israel and they're trying to get rid of cash. They're bringing in the mark of the beast. A couple things, I think she's not aware of the Bible. So she goes on a rabbit hole a little bit about potentially prisoner exchange. We're going to talk the big picture, but at the end of the day, I think she gives a good perspective of this potential false flag. Let's roll it.
October 7th, 2023. This is Efrat Fenigzon, and I'm here to share an update from Israel-Hamas war, which started this morning. I'm going to share some key details and concerns, mostly based on Israeli citizens' voices from the ground and based on official statements. This is a very tough day for me and for us in Israel, and it is tough for people of Palestine too, especially now that Israel is starting to attack back. This war and every war is a horrible thing for everyone involved, except for those who get rich from it, right? This morning, around 6 a.m., around sunrise, hundreds of Hamas terrorists, at least 300, breached the border fence in multiple places, completely unimpeded, leading to terror attacks and kidnappings in Israeli towns or villages. The terrorists infiltrated a significant number of dry land outposts as well as a naval infiltration point in Zikim. As we speak, Israel is actively engaged in combat in 22 outposts. This is from the IDF statement, the official statement. The attacks have already resulted in over 100 casualties and more than 100 kidnaps of Israeli citizens. In one village, 50 Israelis have been taken hostage, leaving people locked in shelters for long periods of 8 to 9 hours without rescue. By the way, the 100 kidnappings is not the official number. It's what we hear from people on the ground. I think official numbers talk about 30 or 40 people, but we know there are more. In some places, the terrorists were burning the village and people didn't know if to leave the shelter and surrender or stay and pray for the fire to not reach them. Many young people who were in a big outdoor party near the Gaza envelope villages were attacked there. Some ran away, some were injured, and some are still missing. Apparently, Israeli defense forces that were supposed to be around Gaza were placed around the West Bank because of security concerns, so that the Gaza envelope was left unoccupied with military. They say around 60 to 80% of that area was left without the IDF forces that were supposed to be there. Soldiers are being recruited for reserves as we speak from this morning, but because of stupid reasons such as no public transport, they're waiting hours to get to the bases. Mainstream media, this is an interesting point, apparently admits that IDF spokesperson is forbidding them to tell the complete truth about what's happening, highlighting a lack of transparency. And this is to the Israeli citizens. I'm not even talking about overseas. I'm talking about to the people of Israel here. For hours and hours, the reports that came from the mainstream media were completely lacking, and people started to rely mostly on the news from each other, from people on the ground. Only now, 6 p.m. Israel time, or it's actually 7 already, 12 hours after the event started, we received the first formal statement from the IDF spokesperson, and I will include an article with that statement in the notes. A year ago, there was a military operation in Gaza to prepare for such events, and ongoingly there are trainings for these kind of scenarios. This raises serious questions for me anyway about Israeli intelligence. What happened? 2 years ago, there was a successful deployment of underground barriers with sensors to alert exactly on these kind of terrorist breaches. Israel has one of the most advanced and high-tech armies. How come there was zero response to the border and fence breaching? I cannot understand that. Personally, I served in the IDF 25 years ago in the intelligence forces. There's no way, in my view, that Israel did not know of what's coming. A cat moving alongside the fence is triggering all forces. So what happened to the strongest army in the world? How come border crossings were wide open? Something is very wrong here. Something is very strange. This chain of events is very unusual and not typical for the Israeli defense system. With the recent normalization efforts of Israel and Palestine led by Saudi Arabia, I wonder whether a prisoners exchange deal is something that could only be seriously considered by Israel if a shocking event like that happened. Is it a possibility that only with Israel hostages it can be justified to release dangerous prisoners from Israeli prisons? I don't know. Mainstream media reported that Deputy Hamas leader Salah al-Aruri suggests using Israeli prisoners for leverage in negotiations. So maybe. A point about the situation in Israel in the past few years, which I want to make, is related to and those who follow me know that there's a general sense of insecurity in Israel. There's political and social instability and unrest. Public funds are being misused on agendas such as COVID, climate, judicial reform, abolishing cash, and many more. The current government is highly corrupt in my view, while the previous one was no better. I don't care about having a popular opinion. I care about exposing evil forces wherever and whomever they are. So to me, this surprise attack seems like a planned operation on all fronts. This is a failure to protect the people of Israel, for sure. Perhaps the biggest failure since the Yom Kippur War exactly 50 years ago, if not bigger. By the way, is it a coincidence it's exactly 50 years ago, almost on the day? The Yom Kippur War was on October 6, 1973. If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would say that this feels like the work of the deep state. It feels like the people of Israel and the people of Palestine have been sold once again to the higher powers that be. At the same time, this is still very, very difficult to fathom.
It's interesting. She screams false flag. Multiple other witnesses as well. We'll cover some more. And I just thought it was interesting. They did a training test. And she's like, what happened? Folks, they have technology to see underground. I mean, I'm not buying it for a second. Here's another article. No, the Hamas invasion was not an Israeli intelligence failure. Mainstream news on the right here. Hamas attack raises questions over an Israeli intelligence failure. That's what they're trying to pull. This article I thought was interesting. One would have to be almost hopelessly naive to buy the corporate state media line that Hamas invasion yesterday morning was an Israeli intelligence failure. Mossad is one of, if not the most powerful intelligence agencies on the planet. You need to think Epstein and the honey traps, right? It routinely shares intelligence, furthermore, with the Five Eyes intelligence services. It has its tentacles deep inside of every alley and foe of importance. It has spies all over the Gaza Strip. And the Gaza Strip, it goes on to say, is arguably the most heavily surveilled geographic area on Earth. It reminds me of a smart city test. So the Hamas invasion of the southern Israel border yesterday was an operation involved in tens of thousands of operatives across land, sea, and air. He goes on to say, I'm sure this is his opinion. And no doubt some real sick things happen. Rape, murder. But it smells like an inside job, or at least allowed to happen, my friends. Stephen Benoon, similar opinion. Christian man, grew up Jewish, from Israeli News Live. I put his video on Telegram so you can actually get to his YouTube channel if for some reason you can't find his YouTube channel. But he goes on to read a letter that he vetted, and he has contacts in Israel. He goes on to say, like the woman, they removed IDF soldiers in the area and took away the town's armory supplies, or at least a portion thereof, de-armed them. There's no air support for 6 hours. Sensors that can detect a pigeon like would go off. And here's this woman's testimony. She said she would be alerted, woken up, if a pigeon was flying by the fence of the area where the breach happened. This is on BitChute. Stephen Benoon plays this testimony as well. He goes on to say Hamas was created by Israel, right? That was the famous Ron Paul speech that went viral years ago. And I thought this was interesting. This is why I'm pulling in Steve, is he basically said some sort of false flag would start World War III. He said this months ago from some of his intelligence sources. And I thought this was interesting. He also mentioned from the testimony of one of these whistleblowers is a European-looking men crossed into Israel. Pretty fascinating, my friends. So why? What's the big picture? Why the stand down? Well, first of all, the synagogue of Satan hates those that killed the fallen angel offspring, the Nephilim, right? This is a seed war in the promised land years ago. So that's one reason why I don't think they mind destroying some of their own people, right? The synagogue of Satan worship Lucifer. That's why they're so obsessed with DNA. And that's probably why they actually poked the people of Israel, tying them into this transhumanism, this wireless body area network where they want to make us all nodes tied into this artificial intelligence system that we always talk about. Bullet point number 2, land grab excuse. This land grab, if you see Israel expand to the old promised land, it reminds me of my lost tribe dream as well, where Muslims and people from Africa are converting to Christianity and then just walking towards the promised land. There's biblical prophecy potentially being fulfilled there. Number 3, dictatorship, Netanyahu's power grab. And I'm blown away how Christians love this. Let's read from an article on Netanyahu's power grab. By granting us the majority in parliament, the people have given us the legitimacy of governing alone, without the interference of magistrates who are not elected. They want to free themselves. This is about Netanyahu's government. They want to free themselves from judicial weight and legislate as they see fit without the control of judges. So that would be like the corrupt judicial system here in the United States having somebody over them. I mean, if they were good, fine. But if they were evil, good night, my friends. Power grab. Number 4, World War III, to bring in this one world government. They want to bring in the Antichrist, right? Tied, in our humble opinion, to artificial intelligence. And number 5, destabilization, especially of the West. You need to think about this. Our borders are wide open, also in Europe, with this Muslim flooding. And you're seeing protests all over the West. And then you see the right in these different countries pushing back. It's primed for civil war. Not only with the left, at least here in the United States, just being pure communists. But it's just interesting, my friends. Is this another destabilization factor? Black versus white, rich versus poor, tranny versus Christians, Muslims versus Christians. It's just another bullet in the chamber for the global elite to create civil unrest and civil war. Now, I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to do a Bible study as well about what we're seeing from a strategic standpoint. But I highly recommend Final Days Report episode 257, World War III players, the whore versus the woman. How does this AI beast system play from a biblical perspective, and Jerusalem's role? Right? The 10 kings will make war with the whore and burn her. Fire will come down from heaven. They'll burn the whore. I think this is any place that has an obelisk, the system, this witchcraft system. And the Lord, I'll give you a little preview, the Lord is going to bring nations against Jerusalem. This is the end times marker. Luke 21:20, and when you shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is nigh. The desolation is when the Antichrist sits in the holy place. I think that is sitting within some sort of quantum computer driven by artificial intelligence and defiling you, the temple of God that is in you. There's the traditional thought, which maybe it'll be a combination of both, that a temple on the Temple Mount, the Antichrist will sit there and declare himself God. My question is, if they build a temple on the Temple Mount, but it doesn't worship Jesus Christ, is it really holy? I don't know. Let's continue. Matthew 24, and when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist, saying that he is God in the temple of God, spoken of by Daniel. I think this has to do with transhumanism. By Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place. Whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee to the mountains. There are Christians in Judea. There are Jews that are underground, and there are Christian Palestinians as well. And this is, I thought, fascinating. Zechariah 14. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh. This to me is the second coming, post-trib rapture, in my humble opinion. And thy spoil shall be divided in the midst of thee, for I will gather all nations. Christ will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle. Why? This is what I want to talk about. Why would all nations come against Jerusalem to battle? And the city shall be taken, and the houses rifled, and the women ravished, raped. There was rape that happened with what we just saw. And half the city shall go forth into captivity, and the residue of the people shall not be cut off from the city. This will be a remnant. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against those nations as when he fought in the day of the battle. So what I think is going to happen here, the Lord's going to bring these nations against Israel, because it reminds me of the 10 kings that align with the Antichrist, right? And then make war with the whore, with all the evil, all the Babylonian witchcraft, the Kabbalah witchcraft, the going after our kids, the adrenochrome, the pedophilia, the bestiality, all the perversion, the sexual sin, Hollyweird, all of it. It's going to be destroyed. The fake church, Luciferian church, any place there's an obelisk, this system, I think, will be destroyed, and the Antichrist will come in as this false light. Now, you need to think about this. All of Israel will be saved with the times of the Gentile, when the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled. The times of the Gentiles fulfilled, even with pre-trib rapture scholars, is that last day, the great and terrible day of the Lord. So a remnant will be saved from Israel. So all of Israel will be saved when the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled. That is the last day, the great and terrible day of the Lord. So if you're saved, you're saved. If you're not, you're not. It's like a glove, my friends. So why would all nations come against Jerusalem? Well, it has to do, in my humble opinion, about witchcraft. Let's go to the Old Testament, Nahum chapter 3, verse 4. Because of thy multitude of thy whoredoms, of the well-favored harlot, the mistress of witchcrafts, that selleth nations through her whoredoms and families through her witchcrafts. I mean, we're dealing with witchcraft, with Kabbalah. Final Days Report, episode 235, Kabbalah sex magic taught in schools. Incest. This is in your college education system, my friends. Let's continue. Revelation chapter 2, verse 20. Notwithstanding, I have a few things against thee. This is talking to the church, a church at the time, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and to seduce my servants to commit fornication and to eat things sacrificed unto idols. The church needs to be pure, my friends. Get in your King James Version, get rid of your habitual sin, and get in your spiritual warfare closet. So what will bring the nations against Jerusalem? This pharmakia element, the synagogues of Satan, perversion, like pedophilia, incest, sin, adrenochrome, destruction of families, destruction of our kids, chopping off their private parts, the banker slavery, human trafficking. I think it'll be exposed that these globalists, this witchcraft system, it'll come out that they brought on the seals on purpose, because we saw that. Seal 1 is about poison and toxin. Seal 2 is mind controlism and probably communism as well. I think there's mind controlism element there. We've seen the destruction of the supply chain, food manufacturing plants burning up, war on chickens. Our ministry, we cover all of it. And then Seal 4 will be World War III that they're priming. So the Antichrist will come in as a hero, as a false light. But they're playing both sides. The persona of Satan is this whole cabal, universal basic income, the black hats, mainstream media, carbon dioxide, green energy, right? This destruction of the seals. This is the whore, controlled by World Economic Forum, UN, central bankers, the harlot church. And then there'll be the false light, this quantum financial system. And this is a slide from Revelation Wars. He's kind of gone silent. But I was just like, wait a minute. QFS, quantum financial system? I watched a podcast on that. That screams Mark of the Beast system. All these countries are signing up for QFS. Sounded somewhat good on paper until it was centralized. Med beds, quantum healing, anything quantum is demonic. It's beast system. It's false light, my friends. It's this age of Aquarius, this new age love, Christ consciousness. These are bullet points of Luciferian false light. Free energy. Free energy will come out in the end of days, my friends. But in terms of what's going to happen is the 10 kings will align with the Antichrist and the false prophet and bring fire down and destroy the whore. Right? So who's the whore? I think the whore is part of the system of the fake religion at the top. And if you're involved in the Catholic Church, I know Christians, for sure they're saved that are Catholics. I think this is primarily at the top. And there's so many other religions that are just an apostate, an abomination. We have the obelisk in Washington, D.C., and then the financial arm of the city of London, but it's all over the place as well. Check out the synagogue of Satan in Israel. And I think we're dealing with Satanists all over the place, right? All over the place. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings. I think they might be tech companies which have received no kingdom as of yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind. How do you have one mind? Well, it's an artificial hive mind. and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. They form, in my humble opinion, after seal 4, that will actually, when you read Daniel 7, will subdue the bear, the leopard, this is EU, the lion, UK, and the eagle comes out of the lion, right? So there'll be World War III from seal 4. These players will be subdued, happening right now. So let's continue. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast shall hate the whore. The whore is over here, this darkness, the cabal, the adrenochrome, the people that are involved in human trafficking.